Hi, everyone. I'm noticing if you're watching on Facebook, there is a lot of comments coming through from spam, trying to get you to join. Please do not click those links. I'm trying to block the people as fast as possible. But we are going to get started right now. So thank you for joining us. And welcome to the Trans Awareness Panel presented by Pride YMM. My name is Mitchell. I use he or they pronouns, and this recording will be available afterwards for people who aren't able to attend live. I would like to start by acknowledging that the land we occupy, Nistawayo, is within Treaty 8 and is the traditional territory of the Cree and Dene Nations and the unceded homeland of the Métis people. We are gathered today to engage in collaborative learning and to challenge ongoing aspects of colonialism, including homophobia, transphobia, heteronormativity, and cisnormativity. We recognize and honor all the Indigenous people, especially Two-Spirit people, who have stewarded this land for time immemorial prior to first contact, and who continue to resist oppressive colonial definitions of sexuality and gender to this day. This panel is brought to you by Pride YMM, so please like us and follow. Please like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram at PrideYMM. You can also visit our website, prideYMM.ca, where you can see upcoming programs and register to be a member for free. We are here today to help break down barriers and remove stigma that is faced by transgender people in our community. Because so often the conversation around trans people focuses on the process of medically transitioning that we lose sight of their humanity, that topic will not be a focus of conversation today. I do want to give a content warning that some of the topics may be triggering and can be difficult to hear. We suggest that parents preview the conversation and ensure it is appropriate for their children before allowing them to view it. As it has often been said over the last year, that it is out of these uncomfortable conversations that we find the space to learn and grow. We have curated these questions to offer a wide lens into the lives of our panelists. We also want to acknowledge that the stories, experiences, and opinions presented today are those of the panelists. Although they may be representative of the experience of many trans people, it's important to remember that each person's journey is different, and our intention is not to invalidate those who have had different lived experiences. Finally, we do want to acknowledge the importance that intersectionality plays in our lives and that each part of our identity impacts our view of the world and our experiences within it. Acknowledging that trans women of color are statistically the most discriminated against in our society. We're going to start by allowing panelists to introduce themselves. If they can each tell me your name, where you're from, what you do, and one extra fun fact. So first up, I'm going to welcome Carrie Ann.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Carrie Ann, and I've been a resident of Fort McMurray for about 14 years. I grew up in the West Island of Montreal. I moved out here when I was about 26. And fun fact, I have an 8-year-old Great Dane, and I love dogs.
Awesome. And our next panelist is Cindy. Can you introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. I am Sandy Rivers. I am originally from Newfoundland. I moved to Fort McMurray just after high school when I was 18. I lived there for about 16 years. I currently live in Edmonton. I'm a public speaker. I also do LGBTQ plus inclusion and diversity trainings in Fort McMurray still sometimes, but for the Pride Center of Edmonton. And I am a professional stand-up comedian.
Awesome. Thank you. So we're going to kind of go a little bit chronologically in your life. So when did you first know that you were a girl? Cindy?
Oh, it looks like you're queuing us up now because we get
bigger. You like that?
Yeah. So we didn't really, I didn't really have the words for it or whatever. It was hard to figure out like exactly what was going on, but kind of knew what was up-ish. I knew it was different when I was like 8 years old. Because you have that feeling of just something's not right or this doesn't quite fit or I feel more like the little girls not the little boys and stuff, but like because I'm old and junk, we didn't really have the internet and all that, so didn't like in Newfoundland it's not like we had a lot of exposure to anything really. So yeah, I would say about 8 years old ish, and yeah, that didn't change at all, go figure. So
And Carrie Ann, how about you? When did you know that you were a girl?
So as early as I could really remember, Similar to Cindy, I knew something was different. I knew, you know, you don't really understand the concept of gender at those young ages, but I knew I wanted to be like the other girls, and I didn't understand how to express it or why I looked different. And that was, you know, the earliest memories that I can even think of, as far back as anyone can really go.
And when did you actually come out, though?
So coming out was a bit of a process. The age of 12, I was kind of discovered stealing my sister's clothes. And I had to have the uncomfortable conversation of explaining to my mother that I like wearing women's clothes, but the concept of transgender didn't exist or wasn't really known back then. And it wasn't really until probably my late teens, early 20s, where the concept of transgender was discovered for me. And then I over time, was able to come out to some close friends. And then coming out at work was 2015 with the fire department.
I I mean, sorry, I did some secretive stuff when I was younger too. Never really got caught though, but I didn't actually come out until I was 30. So just almost 5 years ago, almost ish 4.5 years ago, I guess. So yeah, I yeah. So like, I just kept that hidden for like 26 years, and then was like, surprise! And then people were like, what? And I was like, yeah.
and I think there's been a hot topic lately has been about gendered toys, and would having either non-gender specific toys been beneficial for you as a child, or would having more girl toys been better? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it would have been like, I mean, I don't think it would have changed anything for me. I don't know if I would have still come out earlier, and it certainly wouldn't have been like, oh, well, I had my girl, Phil. I guess I don't need to be trans anymore. That wouldn't have happened or anything either. And I don't think it would have came out earlier because it was just the times we were in. But like, there was always this like disappointment, like especially like on Christmas and holidays and stuff, when you get all these presents or birthdays, and you just know, I just know I'm getting boy stuff or tools or toys or trucks or cars, and it's like an inevitable disappointment that was coming every time. And it was just it's a lot for a little kid to just know that I just can guarantee that there's no way I'm going to get anything in any way, shape, or form that I actually want or like, and I'm gonna have to pretend that I do. and to know that from such a young age, it plays on in your brain a little bit.
And Carrie Ann, what was your experience with toys growing up?
My experience was a little bit different in that I had an older sister, younger brother, or I have an older sister, younger brother. But I grew up playing with GI Joes. I grew up being a Ghostbuster. You know, I played in the sandbox with the old metal trucks, lifting sand and moving dirt. But that was okay for me. It didn't bother me. The concept of gender and gendered toys didn't really exist. I couldn't really miss something I didn't really know, I guess.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Can you discuss how parents and family can be supportive of kids and people in their lives that might be coming out and thinking or are questioning their gender identity?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things for me growing up was not knowing if people were going to accept me for who I was. And so for a lot of kids, and myself specifically, I was afraid. And I was afraid that people were going to kill me. I was afraid that, you know, my family wasn't going to accept me, that, you know, the world would end essentially. So that reassurance for anyone going through that process, to let them know that you still love them and still care about them, that you're going to be there for them, and you know what, that you're going to protect them from the world that, if they believe, they may not say the world wants to kill me, but when you provide that safety and that reassurance, it helps them cope with an otherwise extremely difficult situation to go through.
And Cindy, what advice do you have for parents or anybody who has somebody who's come out to them as trans, and what can they do to be supportive?
Yeah, I would say just accept them, love and support them, like acknowledge them if they want you to use pronouns, or if there's something you can do to help them. That's all like life-saving stuff. Any support or kindness that you show towards them is something to help them. The further you push them away or more you deny them, you put them on this island of isolation. They're all by themselves, and it like affects mental health like a lot. And it could cause some really big issues with them, not just now, but even in the future, if they make it that far with their self-esteem and stuff, especially if they continue to transition and stuff. And if they don't feel safe around you, especially if you're family, then they're going to have a very hard time later in life coming out or being out or just being themselves. And that causes a lot of other issues when it comes to like colleges and universities and schools and getting good jobs and careers and like everything. It's a huge trickle down effect. So I would just say support them and learn. And if you don't understand what they're going through, you can still love and support them and say, okay, you know what, I don't get it. You can ask for the time. You say, I just don't understand it, but I'm going to give me some time. I love you. I support you. I'm going to look into this, and then you can do some research. Okay, that is what I think is just remind them that you're there for them, and that you're going to help, and that's okay. And tell them there's nothing wrong with them, for crying out loud. There's nothing wrong with being trans. Carrie Ann was afraid she was going to be killed. So was I. I used to sneak clothes and dress in private. I was afraid too. I developed crippling anxiety that I'm finally getting over, but I had it most of my adult life too, where I was so scared that people would, I'm not even joking, this is a true story. I was so scared that people in like Walmart or Canadian Tire, like a department store, could read my mind and know that I liked wearing girls' clothes, that I was afraid to go in them. I'm not even kidding. I know on a logical level that people can't read my mind and know that, but that's how scared I was. Right?
Yeah.
So tell them it's okay. Let them know it's okay and it's normal. There's nothing wrong with them. That's super helpful.
Yeah, and if I were to add anything, it would be that, especially with youth and people who might just come to you and say that they're questioning, be open to change, because it's a process, and so they might come to you one day and say that, oh, I feel this way, and then a couple months down the road, it's actually this identity and this label feels better, and just be open to that.
I don't mean to devaluate non-binary people. They're super valid. I do know a lot of non-binary people that, or trans people that take the non-binary step first and go, you know what, I thought this is where it is, but I'm not comfortable yet. And then they need to go a little bit further into the trans or the more binary trans female or male side. So it's not that it is a step all the time and it's 100% valid, but they can fluctuate and change. And that just needs to be recognized. And also, I would like to add, thank you, Mitchell, for bringing it up, but I would like to add that sometimes detransition, or people that want to detransition, be very careful of that, be very leery of that. Not because detransition is not a very popular thing. And usually when people want to detransition, it's not because they want to, it's because the pressure society is putting on them. And that is actually a very big sign of huge mental health problems, and there's a very high rate of suicide involved. So I would just look out for that. If you know a trans person that's been in your life for a while and they start talking about detransition, I would urge you to please have a chat with them and just try to get them some help or see what's going on. Okay.
Thank you for adding that. Yes, very, very important.
Yeah, it slipped my mind earlier, but thank you for bringing it up, Mitchell. It's a wonderful topic.
Can you speak about your experience of coming out and kind of that initial phase where you're almost living in two realities? And can you explain how that was for you?
Yeah, so like we have to come out sometimes more than once, like multiple times, and maybe for the rest of our lives, depending on where we're at and what we're doing, or over the phone or in the drive-throughs. Oh, the drive-throughs are my enemy. Anyway, it's not so bad when there's a group because they're not paying attention, but when you're the only car on the drive-through, you get some fun looks sometimes when you sound like me but look like me. Anyway, we're just going off on a tangent. So coming out, when I came out at work first. Well, not there were some close people and stuff, but then work was the big to do, and not so much in all of my private life, right? So I was living in these two separate worlds. I used to call them girl mode and guy mode. I did. So I would go to work in girl mode, but then I would live some of my private life in guy mode, right? So I would present male and I would present female. So when I was presenting as female at work, I was scared that I might see somebody that only knew me in guy mode, and I would be really embarrassed, and I was scared of that. And then when I was presenting in guy mode, I was afraid I'd see somebody from work that only knew me in girl mode. And I was super scared and super embarrassed that they might see me in guy mode, right? Because that, and the biggest problem for me with that was if they saw me in guy mode, I was afraid they'd never be able to think of me as a girl again. Some of the people that only ever met me as Cindy, as me, if they saw me dressed as a guy, I was afraid that I would lose all credibility and they'd never be able to see me as a woman ever again. And that was detrimental. So I kept that up for only 2 months, and then I came out the rest of the way. But yeah.
And Carrie Ann, can you speak to your kind of initial experience at that time?
Yeah, living two identities is not always easy to do, and it kind of got forced on me in that in the beginning you don't really know any different, and you just get raised the way you get raised, and it just so happened that for me, part of what my passions were was watching and enjoying medieval stuff. I used to love dressing up in medieval clothes, watching the medieval movies, and reading medieval books, fantasy books. And so over time, as I grew up, I learned that I wanted to be a knight. I wanted to live by a code of honor, and I wanted to go out and I wanted to save lives and make a difference. But I grew up thinking that only men could do that. And so like I said earlier, I thought people were going to kill me if they found my secret out. So I did everything I could to portray that masculine identity. I learned how to walk. I watched the most masculine men that I could see, and I learned how to walk like them, to the point that my sister used to call me out and laugh at me and ask me why I was walking like that. But I was doing it because I was trying to protect myself. And you know what? It worked. It worked. I grew a mustache, and I did things that I thought guys were supposed to do. And I tried to fit in. And the whole time I was doing that, inside I was screaming and crying and yelling for help. And there just wasn't any way to find it. And there wasn't any way to express it. To the point that even now, it's hard to overcome those perceptions and those boundaries. But you slowly learn that there's ways to overcome that armor that you put on, and that it is sometimes safe to take it off. But you also learn that your perception of what a woman is, for me as a trans woman, learning that, what society views as a woman, or what you've seen or think a woman is supposed to be, is not necessarily what you have to be, right? Like, I can be as feminine or as masculine as I want to be, and that's my choice, and that's okay. I went into work one time, and it was 2020. I thought all women could be knights, and I argued, and I was like, women can be knights. And then I learned, apparently not. Apparently, women in the real world, there's no such thing as a female knight. They're ladies. And I'm like, I didn't know that, but you know what? That's not going to stop me. I'm gonna keep going, and that's just the way it is. So, but I also feel that there's I don't even know how to explain it, but that fascinating gain of experiencing, pretending to be that man for so long, and learning and being amongst them, but also later in life being included with the women, and learning a side that you don't know exists, right? Like some of the things that I learned from my closest friends, you don't know. It blows you away. The experiences that exist that you just have no idea about until you live it.
I totally agree with Carrie Ann. The hypermasculine thing, that is a mask that we wear, especially when you come out later in life, like both of us were 30. That's a thing. Like hypermasculinity. I was like beard and goatee and spitting, sports ball playing, beer drinking, whatever men did. And I don't. If anybody watching, I don't know who's watching right now, but if you know me at all, I am not the exact picture of masculine at all in any way, shape, or form. But that's what we did. It was but it was self-preservation. It was for safety. So yeah, Carrie Ann, good job.
So Cindy, what was your experience at work when you came out, and what kind of challenges did you face, and what did you do that might have went well?
I was going through a lot mentally at the time, and it was all really new to me, and there's no like handbook really to how to come out, and there's no real clear-cut process or way to do it. And I would say start with HR or union rep if you're in a union or whatever, or somebody trustworthy in management, or like somebody that can be a support essentially, and let them know and try to work out a plan. One of the things that I didn't do well and my work didn't do well, and it's partially my fault because I didn't know either, but we decided what we were going to do was, first of all, I moved to a different area after a little bit of time off. The time off was good because I needed to collect myself. I needed to figure out how I was going to approach this. And I needed to make a plan of action here, because we're talking about changing a lot of things about me, even like my appearance and my name, the whole thing. And there's a lot to figure out. So I had to take some time off, like stress leave and stuff, to get that figured out and take care of myself for a bit, because self-care is important. Mental health is important. So that's a good thing. I would totally recommend that. All employers should have some sort of knowledge or program that lets that happen. Anyway, one of the things that I don't think we did very well was we decided, even though we're moving to another area, I'm going to need to get some water in a second, even though we're moving me to another area, so all new faces, we decided to make it a big production and tell everybody about me. Okay, this person who used to be this person is now coming here, and this person is trans now, and this is the bathrooms. And it was just this big to do. And before I even step foot there, I'm completely outed to everybody, and things are just weird and uncomfortable. Now, in some situations that might work. In that situation, that was not the right decision. We should have just said, "Hey, new employee, Cindy, sup?" That's it. But so I don't blame them necessarily. But I kind of like, it's not Catch-22. We should, but all businesses and organizations should be doing better to have more knowledge and stuff in these fields of things that can happen and do happen nowadays, right? So yeah, I think some businesses are trying, and we're doing a lot of education to certain businesses and organizations. I know in Fort McMurray, lots in the region. I presented to quite a few of them, and now I'm doing the same thing in Edmonton. So yeah.
And so, Carrie Ann, what was your experience coming out at work, and what did you do that might have worked well for you, and what is there anything that people can take away not to do?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a story here, and my lived experience a little bit different from Cindy in this regard. For me, coming out of work was a challenge. And it wasn't that it was because work was the problem. It's that I had a lot to to overcome before I could get to the point where I was comfortable coming out at work. And so a little bit of the background here, kind of how I always knew that I was a woman or a girl growing up. I always knew that I was going to be a firefighter. It was one of my earliest words. It was the only thing I ever said I wanted to do. And then I got hired in Fort McMurray as a firefighter, and it was a dream come true. There was like I couldn't have seen myself doing anything else, and so I went through my first purge coming out here, where I thought, I can be a firefighter, and I don't need to be a girl. Like I'll overcome it, right? I've got my dream job. I'm going to save some lives. I'm going to make a difference, and this will just go away. And it didn't. It got harder. But I didn't. I thought, well, just like I thought I was going to be killed early on in the process. I thought I would lose my job. The internet, is not always the best resource. You read a lot of horror stories, but not everyone posts the good stories. And so my family was telling me that I would be killed, or not in that regard. Actually, they would tell me I would lose my job, and that Fort McMurray is so blue collar that I might be attacked, or it's not a good community to come out in, and you're going to lose your job, and it's not safe. You need to come back to Montreal. Don't stay there. You can't come out in Fort McMurray. You can't come out on the fire department. And so I was getting this from all my immediate supports, my closest supports, all of them. They loved me dearly, but they were giving me bad advice. And they meant well. They honestly cared, and they were worried about my safety. They didn't live here. They know that the fire department's predominantly a male-dominated environment. And so I spent a lot of years trying to build up the strength to come out at work, because I didn't, even though I knew I wasn't going to lose my job, there was still a part of me that thought, well, what if, I don't think I can keep going if I lose this job. And so eventually, one of my close friends at the time was on the union, and I kind of went up to him and I said, hey, how can I get fired in this union job? What can I do that can get me fired? How am I protected? And I hadn't really meant to come out to him, but he didn't really know what I was trying to ask him, and I didn't know what to say. So eventually, I just broke down and said, "Hey, I'm transgender. I need to figure out if I'm going to get fired if people find out." And that started the process rolling. And at the time, I don't know if they really had experience with it or not. I feel like I was probably the first to come out on the department. Possibly with the municipality, I don't know. But it took some time, but they were very reassuring, and they told me to take my time, and when I was ready, they would assist the process, and they did. But it got to a point where, in the fire department, it's a very team-oriented process, and my biggest fear coming out was that I would no longer be part of the team, that I would be not included. And that was a legitimate concern for me. And even though you build up that trust and you trust each other with your lives, there was that worry. There's always that worry. You read these stories that say most people will treat you well, but there's going to be at least one that doesn't accept you for who you are, and they will hate you. So I thought, well, there's going to be at least one. But eventually I built up the strength. I started getting ready to it, and then I spoke to the city. I spoke to HR. I spoke to my immediate supervisor, and we sat down and we came up with a game plan. And I decided that the best course of action for me was to show a little bit of mutual respect. And while this may not be the way for most people, it worked for me in the fire department in that I sat down with my crew at Station 1, and I came out to everybody, and it was the most terrifying thing I ever did, but also some of the most reassuring and loving things that have ever been said to me from people that I've only ever really worked with and seen as coworkers, and some of the best hugs I've ever had at the time. And then I go to Hall 4 and I come out at Station 4, and then I go to Hall 3 and I came out at Station 3, and then I went to dispatch and came out in dispatch. And it was exhausting, and it was a trial, but it was worth it because I was able to make progress. And like I said, some of the most beautiful things came out of that. Some of the messages of support and love was just unreal. So I think it really highlights that every process is different for each person, and you need to learn what works for you in your environment, and who is safe to talk to, and figure out the process, and try to avoid the bad advice, right? Don't assume that everything's going to be bad, but be aware that it can be, right? Just be healthy about it, I guess.
I just want to point out quickly that you noticed maybe Carrie Ann just said that her like goal or dream job was being a firefighter her whole life, right? Mine was being a comedian. And I would like to point out that Carrie Ann is a successful firefighter, and I am a professional and I think fairly successful comedian. So being trans, totally still be able to do anything and follow your dreams.
Thanks. I realized I was trying to speak earlier while I was on mute. So if that isn't the line of the year of I'm on mute. So Carrie, and you mentioned that you kind of briefly talked about how your family reacted when you came out. Can you talk a little bit more about maybe the reaction and then how that might have changed over the years?
Yeah, totally. So I guess I know Mitch said earlier, just a little bit of disclaimer here. These can be very sensitive topics to talk about, and hopefully I don't trigger anybody with my story here. But overall, I had a very supportive family. As part of my process, I always believed in the mutual process of information. So I've always made it very clear that I'm open to feedback, I'm open to being talked to, I'm open to being asked questions, and I recognize that the struggle of being a parent of a trans person or being the friend can be difficult for them as well. And so I recognized and acknowledged that early on, and I tried very hard to make sure that they were comfortable with this process. But the reality is that they didn't have the information either. But I knew they loved me, and they always said that from the beginning: is we love you. We're afraid for you, but we love you. But some of that also came with some very severe pain, in that my mom loved me to bits, but one of the things that she said and didn't realize was extremely painful, but I also respect was her view, is she said, you will always be my son. I will never see you any way other than my boy. And it hurt. It hurt so much. But at the time, while I didn't really understand it, I just felt pain. I also understand that, that's her lived experience, and that didn't take away from who I was. That's just how she felt. When my father, he was very honest with me. He said, I don't understand it. I'm worried about you, and you need to respect my boundaries. Yeah, I will accept that you're going to go through this process, but I require you to accept that it's going to take me time, and I'm going to make mistakes, and it might not be perfect, but that's who I am, and you have to accept me as well. And I did. I gave him the time that he needed because I loved him. And sometimes it was painful. And sometimes it really required a lot of talking and explaining. But we became so close because of it. Because I was able to put my personal feelings aside sometimes. And as an example, and I laugh about it, and some people may not find it funny, but one of the things that he always said to me was, how do you know? And he looked me right in the eyes and he said, I'm going to hire a prostitute for you, and you should at least have sex with a prostitute at least once, just to make sure you know. And I mean, those of us who are part of the community, we know gender identity and sexuality are two completely different things. And I didn't want to have sex with a woman. And it took a lot of explanation to tell him that I don't want to have sex with a woman, but he didn't understand. But eventually he came around, and like, we had some great conversations, and the process wasn't easy, but it was still good, and I don't think I could have expected much more than that.
And Cindy, can you speak about your experience coming out to family and how things might have changed?
Yeah. It took a while for them to be okay with it. They were accepting. I like to say they were accepting. They were just really bad at it. That's what I like to say. Like, they were like, okay, all right, we're not throwing you away. All right, we're keeping you. We're keeping you. Don't kill yourself. Don't do that. Don't do that. But an actual quote from my mom, similar to Carrie Ann's mom, said, "I'll never see you as a daughter. You'll always be my son." That's infamous words, apparently, and that does hurt. And you're at first, I'm like, okay, because I'm not smart enough about myself to defend myself in any way, shape, or form at that time, because I'm just coming out and I don't know how anything works. So you're just kind of like, yeah, okay. And after a while, things start to come around a bit. You get a little more comfortable after the coming out over a period of time. So you start having those harder conversations, and then things started to get better. My sister didn't take the news the best, I guess, and it took time, but we're okay now. I do have two kids. One is just about 9. The other one is 5. And they're great. We have a wonderful, wonderful relationship. I see them lots, and they are like little superheroes, I like to say, because they saved my life. And, but coming out to family is an interesting thing. It's scary. It's scary. It's probably one of the scariest things I ever did in my entire life, I would think. But and yeah, it's a tough process, and it's hard to. I think it would be different for everybody, depending on their parents and how conservative and or liberal they are, not necessarily politically, but just like socially. And it does get better over time. Well, it did for me, for the most part. I know some cases that's not what happens, and that's too bad, but that's what it was for me.
And what's something that you wish all people in general knew to make them better allies? And is there anything that you want them not to do? So what's some things they can do? What's some things they cannot do to be supportive?
I think they should just speak up if they hear somebody treating a trans person poorly or misgendering them. It happens a lot. And we get it in like bystander mode where we're just kind of watching and nobody's helping or stepping in. And the trans person can't always necessarily pick up for themselves because there's a safety issue if there's only one trans person. And if they might not be unsafe people, but if they're just standing there watching something happen, the trans person doesn't know that they're not safe. There's just a bunch of people watching this happen to them. So that's unsafe. So advocating on their behalf if there's an issue in a bathroom. I do know a lot of trans women that have been confronted, like pretty hardcore in washrooms, and other women just stand there and watch. Like advocate on their behalf or help them, or just respect their pronouns and listen to them, right? And what you shouldn't do is don't ask a transgender person anything you wouldn't ask a cisgender person. If you don't know these words, I can explain them real quick. Transgender, all right. I hope we know that word. That's why we're here. This is. Are you sure you're in the right meeting? Anyway, trans is a Latin term meaning on the other side of. Cis is a Latin term meaning on this side of. All right. So if you're transgender, it means your gender identity differs from the one your sex you were assigned at birth. If you're cisgender, it means your gender identity lines up with the sex you're assigned at birth. Okay? It's it's just two different ways to exist. Trans women and trans men, cis women and cis men. So we get away from saying words like normal woman, biological woman, cis woman, or cis normal man, biological man. So we have like cis and trans. There's just two different ways of existing. There's cis women and trans women, right? That's just how it works. So anyway, if you wouldn't ask a cisgender person a question, don't ask a transgender person that question. Good rule. Good rule. So you wouldn't meet somebody who's cisgender and 20 minutes later, maybe even sooner, go, hey, do you have a penis? Because that happens like all the time. You wouldn't do that to a cisgender, but don't do it to a trans person. The only people that should be or care about what's between somebody's legs is a potential partner. And if that's not you, then that don't matter, right? Some of the common questions are usually questions about your genitals or surgery. Then there's usually, is that your real hair? Or what was your old name? Those are three of the most common ones. Try to avoid anything. Just think about it. If you wouldn't ask a cisgendered person, don't ask a transgender person. Pretty simple, but that's that's how I feel.
Thanks. And Carrie-Ann, what are things that, in your opinion, can people do to be better allies? And is there anything that they need to stop doing?
So one of the things that was important for me, and Cindy touched on it a little bit, was that I'm not good at correcting people when they use the wrong pronouns. I'm not a very passable trans woman in public. I do what I can, but the reality is that being misgendered is a part of the process. And I can cope with it in public with people I don't know. When it's people I do know, it can be very hurtful. But early into the process, when there was people that I was just coming out to, or maybe didn't know me, if I'm in a social environment and I know most of the people, but there's some new people that don't know me, they will almost always go to the male pronouns without knowing any different, and I am unable to correct them. Like unless I know you well enough to correct you, I'm not going to correct you, and that usually leads to a situation where sometimes a person isn't sure, and they'll test the waters, and they'll use a pronoun. And if you don't correct them, they assume they're using the right pronoun. And so early on with some of my closest friends, I had that conversation with them, and I said, I can't correct people. I'm not comfortable, and I don't like being misgendered. And so I always had that selected ally to speak for me in those environments, and it made a big difference. But on the other side of it, also, as an ally or potentially as someone coming across someone who may be trans-identified or transgender, sometimes they're dealing with a lot of issues. They're dealing with, every time they leave their house, they're being misgendered. They're potentially dealing with family problems, and these issues they build up over time. And it gets to a point where eventually you may think you hear something, or something may happen, and you just snap. And it's not that it's good or right to snap show on someone. Sometimes you just hit that tolerance level and you can't control yourself, and you unleash. And it might not even been reasonable or right. Maybe you didn't just get misgendered, but you just lose it. So be compassionate and understanding that if someone is having a bad day and they unleash on you, not that it's right. Try to be understanding and empathize with where they're coming from, and that they've probably been misgendered once too many times. Maybe they've been holding their bladder for far too long and couldn't find a safe bathroom. Who knows? Any of those reasons. And I'm a little bit opposite. Everything Cindy said is true. Don't just walk up to the random trans person and ask all these questions. But for me, I've always found it easier to overcome the discomfort, especially at work. I found it more uncomfortable people going, how do I call you? Ooh, I'm sorry. And so there was situations where, when you're on an emergency call, especially early in the transition, and people dead named me or used my birth name, it got uncomfortable, and then they'd start trying to apologize in the middle of a call. And so I found it was just easier to say, hey, you know what, like, I'm open. If you want to ask me a question, ask me a question, but understand that I reserve the right to tell you, A, that's offensive, and explain to you why it's offensive, or B, I retain the right to flat out just say, I'm not going to answer that question. But there's very few questions that I won't answer. And I found over time, like, it was actually a good learning opportunity, because people would then be able to come up and ask me a question, and I'd be able to say, hey, that's an offensive question. Like, not to me, I'll answer it. But bear in mind, if you walk up to another trans person and you ask this question, this is a very offensive question to ask, and be cognizant of it. So I'd use it as a learning opportunity, but it's maybe not the best way to do it for most people, because they may not be comfortable with that.
I think it's okay to do that if you explain it. I do it all the time too. Like, I'm an open book. I'm like, ask a question, I don't care, but don't ask another trans person, because this is not the norm. Okay, but I'm going to satisfy curiosity for learning purposes.
And I think we were very similar, Cindy, in that we are both kind of trailblazing in our respective fields a little bit, and that in our circles we were, most of the time, as far as I know, usually the first trans person that they've had any kind of exposure to.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Yep.
And both of you kind of mentioned talking about being misgendered and pronouns. And so how should people, if they don't know pronouns, how should they approach you? Or what's the proper way to ask, or what do you suggest for people? Cindy, do you want to take that one?
Oh, sure. All right. So I think there's two ways. First of all, if you're not sure somebody's pronouns and you don't know them, you haven't met them before, introduce yourself with your pronouns. Instantly, they're going to know you're a safe person, and they're going to introduce themselves with their pronouns. Now you're coming out, or you're coming off as a safe person, which is great, and you both know each other's pronouns, so you're building this great rapport, and like, it's just an absolute wonderful thing. Or if you do know them, or if you're not in an introduce yourself kind of setting, just ask their pronouns. They'll be happy you did.
Carrie Ann, did you have anything to add? No? Okay. So there's a lot of talk about inclusive language, and I think we often hear people trying to we hear a lot of complaints that it's too difficult, or that people are I can't even think of the words, but just they look at being inclusive as being a negative. What would you like to say to those people, or what does having inclusive language mean for you? Is that too broad of a question?
No. Inclusive language is great. So when people say inclusive language is too difficult, it's not really at all. I just feel like they didn't put a lot of thought into it. There's all kinds of different words. We don't need to say policeman, right? Some of us do. We can say police officer. It's not an uncommon term. It's not like we're not asking for new words even. Like, if you're saying that's not people don't mind saying police officer. Half the world is saying it without anybody. They don't even realize that's what they're doing. You know what I mean? Same with firefighter, fireman. We know that. Mailman, postal worker. There's just a million of them. There really.
I think
the other thing is, sorry, Mitch.
Sorry, I think it's an important distinction that people are saying, "Oh, you're offended by this. You're offended by this," and it's like trying to be more inclusive doesn't necessarily mean that we're offended. It just means we understand that there's more people out there, and we're trying to include more people.
Yeah, it's not about being offended. It's about adding inclusion. So people, I don't know, if they feel better and there's more people in society working together, then everything's better, I think. But it's just, and it's easy language. A lot of people, like facilitators or school teachers and stuff like that, they don't need to say hello, boys and girls, or ladies and gentlemen, very popular one. They can say hello, students, hello, everyone. It's just, these are simple words that people use and don't even realize that they're using them, which are completely gender neutral and easy words to use. Another one for me: drive-throughs are my enemy. Look at me. Me and my voice, we don't match well in a drive-through. And they're my enemy because what do they say every time I order? Thank you, sir. Please drive through, sir. They don't need to say sir or ma'am for that matter. They can, you know what, they can say thank you. Please drive through.
Yeah,
No one's gonna be upset, and everybody's happy. Like, it's not disrespectful. No one's gonna be upset. Everybody's happy, and there is zero chance of a misgendering or offending a non-binary person or a trans. Zero chance. It takes it completely out of the equation. It's super simple.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I used to work in McDonald's in town. I used to always tell my staff, because I was manager, not to use sir or ma'am, because it's you're going to mess up, and it's easier just to be polite without using those kind of gendered words.
Yeah, for sure.
So something that we kind of touched on a little bit, but another huge topic that people, when they're talking about being transgender, talk about is washrooms. And can you kind of speak to your experience of using washrooms and why having gender neutral options are so important?
Yeah, the process is already difficult. You spend a lot of time just trying to learn the language of expression to just try to explain what's going on in your life to people. And then you need to use the bathroom. And it's when you're already dealing with fear and you're already dealing with perceptions of hate, where you feel like everyone is watching you and everyone is going to kill you. Using the bathroom is a challenge, and it's not an easy challenge. And I'm going to use myself as an example, and I don't consider myself that passable. So when I inherently see myself as not passable, even though I know that I'm female and I'm a woman, I know that people inherently see a masculine figure, and so the anxiety that goes with that of, well, what are they thinking? Are they going to attack me? Or are they? It's like, I just need to pee, but am I going to get abused when I go in the bathroom? Am I going to get stared at? And so a lot of times in the beginning, I just wouldn't, and I would hold it until I got home, or I would have to plan my bathroom stops accordingly. And in the beginning, I would use the women's washroom. I'd finally build up the courage to use the bathroom, but I wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. I'd look at the ground. I'd scurry over to a stall, and then I'd try to pee as femininely sounding as I could, hoping that no one would out me while I was on the toilet. To the point that I would even pull some toilet paper just to make people think that, oh yeah, that's a woman over there. I'm peeing next to another woman in the women's bathroom. Where, a gender neutral washroom, you go and you do your business and you're not too worried. I mean, I personally am always worried, even in a gender neutral washroom. But at least in there, I feel more confident. If someone's going to call me out, I can defend myself a little bit, because, like, hey, this is a gender neutral washroom. Like, leave me alone. We all use the toilet. Let me be. And as far as work went, most of the washrooms at work were gender neutral to begin with. And so I never had a problem with that. It's pretty fair and even there, so that was never a big deal.
And Cindy, can you kind of speak about your experience with washrooms? And
yeah, so whether or not we had or have as individuals, like Carrie Ann, myself, or any trans person, whether or not they had an issue in a bathroom before, there's always stress, just in case. It is a real possibility and very high potential for something to happen. So no matter what or how good we look or how passable a trans woman or man is, there's always stress with using a washroom. there's always some form of stress or being scared to use the washroom. When I worked at a certain place in Fort McMurray, when I worked there, the only washrooms available were public washrooms. So for over a year, I would either go home on lunch or I would hold my pee until after work. So I never used the washroom while I was there. So the people I work with and stuff that was there, it was absolutely wonderful, no issues at all, but the washrooms were public. So there could be public, people from the public in there, sorry. So it's scary, and I was too afraid, I couldn't, right? Single stall washrooms are like the unicorn. They're the best. If I see a single stall, gender neutral washroom at an airport, movie theater, or whatever, that's where I'm going. So I'm going in there, locking the door, and there's a toilet and a sink, like a bathroom in a house. That is absolutely perfect. I love them every time because there's no issue. There's not going to be an issue. No one's going to say anything. I'm just doing my business, right? Like, so I am a comedian, and I travel lots. For comedy, and I drive to some of the gigs, you know, if it's drivable, Saskatchewan, Vancouver, anywhere in Alberta, stuff like that. And I have peed my pants twice as an adult because I couldn't hold it long enough to get to the next safe bathroom, nor was I going to do it on the side of the road because at the time it just wouldn't work for me. So I peed my pants twice as an adult because I couldn't get to a bathroom.
Yeah. Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that, because I don't think many people who are watching who aren't trans can't relate to that experience, but it's one that I hear from most trans people, and I think almost every trans person has been in a very similar situation, if not the same. I want to ask a little bit about some of the challenges of transitioning in Fort McMurray as far as healthcare. Carrie-Ann, would you be willing to start there?
Yeah, so I started my process, I guess 2015, when I came out of work is when I first started trying to figure out what was going on. And very early on, one of the first things I realized was finding the information was difficult to begin with, and there was no information for up here. And then eventually, I spoke to my family doctor and kind of explained what was going on and that I wanted to take the next steps. And that I had to find referrals. You know, I had to. Basically, the process is long and difficult, and you need multiple specialists, and you have to jump through and see lots of different people, and you have to prove yourself to each of these people. And so those resources at the time didn't exist up here, and it took me kind of bumping into like another trans person in Edmonton who was a friend of a mutual friend, and she kind of pointed me in the right direction on, you know, a doctor to start with, but I had to go see my family doctor to get the referral. And most family physicians are not specialists in transgender issues. And so he was very open and very accepting, and actually very reassuring, which helped. But he was also very honest and said, like, I don't know this process, and I will help you to the best of my ability, but you need to bring me the information. You need to bring me the name of the doctor you need a referral to. You know, I need a name, I need a phone number, I need all the details, and I will sign that paperwork and I will get your process going for you. But good luck, right? Like, bring it to me, go get it. And that wasn't easy. And then there were points when I was dealing with the mental health before coming out, and those resources, as far as I was aware, didn't exist up here either. And I reached out to the work health program, and they were helpful with coping strategies, but they weren't specialists in transgender issues either, and they weren't at the time able to help push me in the right direction. They weren't able to give me resources, you know, and so it made the journey a lot harder. it made, I got very depressed for a very long time, thinking that there was no way that this was ever going to happen. And then when it does finally start to happen, the wait list is astronomical. And like each wait list for each doctor takes forever. And each day is a struggle. And then on top of it, they send you a referral, but they didn't always send you a notice saying that they received it or that you were in the queue. And so sometimes you've been waiting a year and a half and you're dying inside going, where am I in this process? Am I not hearing anything? So you phone them and they get mad at you. Stop harassing us. You're in the process. We will phone you. We'll let you know. And that's difficult. It's so difficult. And then even just the commute. You got to drive to Edmonton. That's expensive. It's time consuming. It's a lengthy, long, expensive, difficult process. Changing my name, and Cindy will explain a little bit after my story here. But when I had to change my name, at the time I had to get the paperwork. Right, I didn't know how to find out the information, but eventually I figured out I needed to get paperwork. I needed to go to the RCMP station, and I needed to apply for a name change. And while I was there applying for this name change, one of my coworkers showed up. And what the RCMP station in Timberlea isn't a very big waiting area. So my coworker sees me and he's like, "Oh, hey, Mills, what you doing? Why are you here?" Well, I wasn't out at work yet. I was just trying to change my name and get working towards the process. And I had no idea what to say. Thankfully, I relied on the kind of a truthful lie and my reputation at work for being a little quirky and a little weird. I looked at him and I said, "You know what? I don't like my middle names. I'm here to change my middle names." And I wasn't lying. I was changing my middle names as well. I just didn't tell him I was changing my first name as well. But also at that time, the process, they announced it to the whole province. Like, "Oh, you're getting a name change. We're telling the entire province of Alberta. And if you don't want Alberta to know, go stand before a judge. Those are your options." That's how you start the process, right? That's the beginning. Stand before a judge or tell the province you're trans. Woo, not easy. But it's changed a little bit, and that's kind of some of the struggles that I went through. I'll let Cindy jump in.
Yeah, so it is a little different now. Well, first of all, for name change, they don't tell the province anymore. That's completely done away with. So it's just the apply thing. There's still waiting periods for that, though, because you have to get fingerprints and so on. And it costs money. So it's waiting list after waiting list after waiting list. If you can find a doctor now, they start hormone replacement therapy on informed consent. So basically saying they're not a trans expert, they are a doctor, they know how hormones work, you're accepting the hormones because you are transgender, and you can start your process there. So that does save you like maybe 8 months to a year of a waiting list, but it's still waiting list after waiting list after waiting list after waiting list, and that takes 3 to 4 to 5 years, depending on how fast you are at taking care of things on your end. And in Edmonton now, there's the Trans Wellness Center, so it's kind of everything trans related, including paperwork and referrals and psychologists write letters of approval and stuff. Everything's kind of under one roof, and it's making the processes faster. Now, there's still a long wait time because everything is so backed up, but it does make the process a little bit quicker. So that's an awesome thing to see here in Edmonton. It's called the Trans Wellness Center, or just the Wellness Center, and it's making changes, but things are still a little behind right now. Like Carrie Ann said, the process, there's no handbook. We got to figure out this stuff all on our own. Essentially, there's nothing out there. There's no step-by-step guide. The best thing to do is find another trans person who's kind of been through it and use them as a bit of a mentor to help them through it, if that's possible. If not, it takes a lot of research, time, doing things wrong, and then having to do them again, and so on, and it's like trial and error until you figure it all out. And it's extremely frustrating to be on these waiting lists. Like the process of being or transition medically is very long and hard, which I think is really unfair, right? Because I'm already trying to get rid of something long and hard. So, like, it just doesn't make. I had to. I'm sorry. Yeah, but Carrie Ann hit the nail on the head. For most of it, it's similar now. It's easier than it used to be because you can kind of catch all under one roof, but there's still a lot of wait times and waiting periods in between.
Yeah, and you both have kind of touched on it. Can you speak a little bit about your struggles with mental health throughout this process?
Yeah. So, like, it's hard. It's a tough process. It's a tough decision to make to come out when you decide to come out. It's tough to tell people. Reactions that you get sometimes are tough. The people staring at you, the misgendering, everything plays on you emotionally. It's like, and nothing gets better right away. Coming out isn't like magical fairy, boom, you're now what you like. You're a woman now because, yeah, finally, duh. It's not like that at all. It's not even close. Things get a lot worse for at least for me for the first little while, and then things slowly start to get better. But like my anxiety was bad, and I have depression, and like it's it's so important to take care of your mental health. But like the support network and loving people are super important for trans people, and I can't even begin to explain some of the mental hoops I had to like jump through myself to stay on this planet.
And Carrie Ann, can you kind of speak to some of your experiences and struggles with mental health?
Yeah, so I'm going to apologize in advance. The last talk I did, I kind of broke down a little bit. So I got some Kleenex here. I'm going to try and get my way through this one without crying. But if I break down, I apologize in advance. I don't like crying in front of anyone, anytime, let alone on a screen of people. But the mental health is a tough one. Cindy touched on some very good points. The process is already difficult to begin with. You're trying to learn and make your way through this life, and there's a lot of negative emotions that come with it. And so for myself, I experienced a lot of fear. I experienced a lot of anxiety. I experienced very severe longing because every time I would go outside, I would see the other women of the world, and I would just think, like, why? Why do I not look like her? Why am I so different? Why was this done to me? Why do I have to suffer like this? And it leads to a lot of self-criticism, and I'll use the word for myself, a lot of self-hatred. And the process of transitioning does help. For me, it helped a lot. Like as I made my way through some of the stages, it got easier. My mental health got a little bit better. The fear still exists. The anxiety still exists. And I'm not going to lie, my perception of feeling like I don't pass still causes me to have a lot of self-hatred even till today. And it's, when you wake up in the morning and you see yourself in the mirror, and the only thing that you can think is, I hate my life. It's hard. God damn, I'm going to cry again. I'm not going to cry this time. It is. It's so hard. Yeah, it's so emotional. And estrogen makes it even worse. So emotional, but I love it. It's just this roller coaster. And then, I'm gonna go down the path again, and I'm gonna. It's a long story, and I'm sorry. But like the mental health side of just surviving to make it to this point, right? Like I hit the age of 30, and realized that just being a firefighter wasn't enough to sustain me anymore. And I realized that I wasn't getting any younger, and if I didn't make a change in my life, I wasn't going to survive. Um, and I work on an ambulance, I work on fire trucks, and I've seen the effects that mental health and suicide can have on people. And so I had enough awareness to know that I was starting to have some very bad thoughts. And, thoughts of suicide have always been there for me. It's always something you kind of wonder about, and you're like, well, maybe life just would be easier if I was dead. I'm just tired of being in pain all the time. But you kind of work through it, and as you make progress, it gets a little easier. But I hit that window or that wall, and I realized that I was starting to have these thoughts of suicide regularly, and it scared me a little bit. And so I didn't know what to do, and I decided that it was time to transition, and I didn't know how. Um, and I'll be honest, one of the things that really got me through it was my experience through work, because I've seen the results of suicide. I've seen the results of what happens when people just can't cope any longer, whatever the reason may have been for ultimately choosing that path. And I knew that I couldn't just go and kill myself, because I knew if I did it in town, one of my coworkers was going to have to come and remove my body. And I've done that. I've had to go and do body removals, and it's not fun. But we manage it as professionals. But to do that to one of my coworkers, I couldn't. I couldn't do it. But then I started thinking, well, what if I just go somewhere outside of the city and kill myself? Maybe if I go somewhere where my coworkers won't have to pick me up, I'll be better off. Then I'm not hurting my coworkers. And I realized, well, then my family won't have a body to cremate or put a burial to. And that also caused me a lot of pain. And so those things helped me get through that difficult time. But ultimately, it was transitioning and making the steps to be authentic with myself that saved me overall and helped with those mental health issues.
If I can just touch on something real quick. Mitchell, I believe, has a stat about suicide and trans people. It's too common. I attempted suicide twice, and I failed. Can you imagine a world where we feel that being transgender is so bad that killing ourselves is better? We're made to feel that being trans is so bad that killing ourselves is better.
Thank you both for being so vulnerable and open. And it's hard to share these experiences, but the things like this is what really gets through to people. And I hope it's from these difficult conversations that we do see change and that things do get better. And Cindy had mentioned the statistics, and in Canada, cisgender people, about 17% have attempted or seriously contemplated suicide. And for trans people, that number is 46%, which is staggering. I do want to, we've got a little over time, and I want to kind of end this discussion on a positive note. And my question to both of you is, what gives you hope that the world is positively changing and that we are seeing more acceptance and that we're on the right path?
The fact that there's more people coming out sorry, at a younger age. So like I came out when I was 30. There was no way I was coming out in high school or when I was a teenager. That just was not an option. That was not going to happen under any circumstance. It was not safe to do so. There was no way I was comfortable doing that. And I didn't know anybody that would have or would or did. The fact that the youth are feeling more comfortable or safe enough to be able to do that in this day and age is a lot more. It's a good thing to see, because it means that as a society, we're not treating it or looking at it as bad as we used to. I mean, there's still a really long way to go. So generationally speaking, I think it's getting better. So every generation a little more and more and more accepting. So at some point it's moving in the right direction, I guess, but like on a generation by generation basis. So it's still going to take some time. And also, I guess like they like I'm a comedian. They let me on stages and TV and through borders to tell jokes in casinos in Vegas, and like that's I don't think that's not super common. So if they're letting me do that, I think we're going in the right direction.
And Carrie Ann, what gives you hope that we're changing in the right direction?
Yeah, we're here having this conversation, and it's beautiful, and that alone gives me hope. They're lighting up the bridge tonight in the trans colors, and that brings me hope. And I'll know what those colors are, and maybe most people who see that won't, but how amazing and powerful is that on its own? And then all the points Cindy brought up, people's transitioning younger, and even my point with work, like there was a point where firefighters could only be men, and then women have fought hard to join the fire service, and here I am as a trans woman successfully fighting fires and helping people, and I'm accepted while I do it, right? And 30 years ago that wouldn't have happened. It wasn't a thing. And it's just so amazing, and the knowledge and the awareness is growing. We have protected rights in the system now. We got a long way to go, but we've come quite far.
Thanks. I want to thank both of you for your time and the emotional labor that you've given us today. I want to thank everyone who's been viewing for taking the time to learn and grow with us. If you want to stay up to date with Pride YMM, make sure you like, subscribe, and follow on all social media platforms. If you are looking for more resources in Fort McMurray, Pride YMM offers monthly support groups for both trans people and for caregivers. Some Other Solutions is available for crisis prevention, and they have a 24/7 helpline. CMHA also offers a wide array of mental health supports, including support groups and workshops. And if you're looking specifically for more trans support, Skipping Stone is based out of Calgary and offers a wide array of supports for trans folks, including ID clinic support groups and more. And Cindy mentioned earlier the Trans Wellness Center in Edmonton. And if you're unsure and looking for more support, please reach out to us and we'll be happy to assist. Thank you all, and happy Transgender Day of Visibility.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.